a period between January and March. So effectively our revenue streams dropped a little bit there. The aged care independent living units is down by 240. It's mainly the insurance claim, so that'll be recognised in the year-end data coming through. Private works is behind by about 81,000. COVID-related items, also our staff resourcing side of things, so we haven't had as many private works requests coming through. Real estate revenue is lower by budget by about 400,000. And there's three main indicators there. There's reduced commercial rental due to COVID and concessions, as well as a few shop vacancies. The grant funding for the roof over there, the replacement roof, we've just got to recognise the year-end data there. And there's just been a delay in the settlement of an airport lot at the end of June. So that was another 100,000 of the 400. General purpose revenue, a bit lower by about 118,000, a bit lower in our financial assistance grants, and also then the interest on our investments coming through. Public convenience and our community centres and halls, a bit lower by 70 and 94,000. Again, grants be recognised at year end. Parks, gardens and sporting grounds, again, the same theme. We've got grant contributions to be recognised at year-end data, so it's behind by about 450,000. The aerodrome is the big one, which is about $4.5 million behind budget at this point in time. There's a few items there, as you'll see on the summary on page 3. The level of expenditure on the project's been a bit lower than expected, so therefore the grant funding is a little bit behind. Milestone grant funding to be recognised at year-end data. A bit lower in our user fees, and we didn't have any contributions for the Warbirds over Scarinage yet because it's now been pushed back to March. But when we were doing the budgets in the 2021 year, we were expecting that to happen sort of like in this current financial year, or early in August, September, I think it was pitched initially. Moving into our bridges revenue, it's lower than budget by nearly $500,000. Again, it's in regards to our recognition of our grant funding, but also some of those bridges are a little bit behind schedule at the moment. So we'll see that in our actual capital expenditure area. RMS state roads revenue, it's a bucket to the system because it's higher by about nearly $250,000. Just had increased workloads over there, which has been good. And also June's claim has to be recognised yet, so that revenue will increase. We'll see in the operating expenses where the other side of that is major increases in our expenditure side. Regional roads revenue is lower by about $348,000. Again, recognition of our government grants at the end of the year. So that's another one, year-end recognition. Local roads and revenue, again, grant funding at year end. So as you can see, the theme is all about the grant funding and recognising those at year end. And the same for transport auxiliaries, the same scenario with the Scone CBD. Moving into the non-operating revenue and expenditure, a little bit behind budget at the moment by about $74,000. The loan funding for government place, we didn't enter into the loan funding by the year end. We're just looking at what we're doing in infrastructure works over there before we actually go into getting our liability for our loan. So it's just been delayed effectively until we decide what infrastructure works need to be undertaken. Operating expenditure, it's pretty well line ball. It's about 320,000 underspent at the moment, but there is a number of items that go up and down within the organisation. If we just look at those on a high level basis, fleet operation costs is a bit lower by about 93,000 just with our maintenance and fuel consumptions to date. Stormwater drainage is behind budget by about 107,000, so just less activities undertaken for maintenance. Waste landfill costs higher than budget by about $111,000, just increasing a bit of our curbside collection plus higher state levies, just with increased volumes of waste going into the facilities. But we should see a bit of a benefit in the current year we're in, with some deductions going out the other way for clean fill coming back out to some of our sites. Health planning, town planning, health and building control costs are lower by nearly $250,000. Just reduced costs in regards to vacancies within the environment and planning department, so that there's savings on the bottom line. Public library costs are lower by about 169,000. Costs are mainly due to one, departure from the regional library, but also lower costs caused by COVID restrictions and our trainee vacancy at the moment. Plus also we've got library catalogue purchases, which we've got a number of invoices still to come into play before the end of June. So that will change by year end once we finalise the financial statements. Sporting grounds and venues, those costs are higher by about 175,000, so a little bit higher there, mainly associated around White Park operations. So obviously we're reviewing that operations coming through for the current financial year to try and reel in those costs and get a good business case over the White Park facility. Aerodrome operational costs are higher by about 103,000, just some additional costs in our admin and operation facility maintenance while the development stages are currently going on. Just we're reviewing those costs, obviously coming through to the new financial year, and just making sure that we mitigate some of the overspends that have happened during this year with the redevelopment works. Bridge maintenance, lower by 180,000. Obviously, we haven't done a lot of bridge maintenance coming through, obviously with our grant funding that we were secured for replacement of 14 bridges. So that's been a big win for council. So we're a little bit underspent at the moment in our bridge maintenance area. As I said earlier with the RMS, we've got increased revenue there, but also our costs have gone up by $500,000. So when you look at that, there's a lot more work that was done on the highway coming through. So we've got a June claim to come through and offset that overspend there. And water supply operational at Murrundi and Scone is higher than budget by about 180K. So obviously we'll review those costs and make sure that there's no capital renewals in those. The other big mover in the actual operations is the capital works program. As I said earlier in the summary, it was one of the major movements. We're underspent by about $4.2 million, and just highlighted with the number of projects coming through and where they're sitting. So the Government Place Hostel, as I said earlier with the loan facility, we're just trying to deferral of our works for the facility, just with the design and expansion to be determined coming through over there. Independent living units is lower than budget by about 111,000, just with the delay in the finalisation of the construction up at Murrundi. So that they've been just pushed back a little bit, a couple of months. So hopefully that'll be finalised shortly. The real estate is lower by about 520,000. Pretty well it relates to Campbell's Corner. So we had in there initially some funding just to look at some of the infrastructure works that was identified in the KPMG structural report. But with our grant funding for the roof, we decided to do the roof first and defer the rest of those costs into this current financial year. Parks and Gardens is lower by about 345K. Number of grant funded projects are nearing completion, and we should be finalising a lot of those early in 21-22. Airport development is lower than budget by about 116K. Overall, when we finally got the invoice from them for Kingston, which is the major contractor out there, and it was about $1 million short of what we accrued for at the end of June. So obviously that will be a little bit underspent by the end of the year. So that's, again, with the end of year cut-offs, we just need to be mindful of those coming through when we're looking at the finance numbers. Cameron's Bridge project, it's lower than budget by about 448,000, just a bit of delay in the commencement of the overall construction of that project coming through. So it's hopefully going to commence in July, August this year. The Merriwa CBD footpath is lower by about 170,000. The project is continuing, just a delay due to securing the contractors towards the end of the 2021 year. So obviously that'll continue going early in this current financial year. Main Road 62, Bunnan Road, the upgrade works out there is lower than budget by about 400. The project works are a little bit behind schedule at the moment, just with some resourcing issues, but the majority of the works, of the construction works, is being deferred to this year. So we'll be finalising all those stages in this current financial year have that road up and going. Again, with Main Road 62 with Bunnan Road, just a shoulder widening. It's lower than budget by about 170. Again, there should be some more costs coming in. Again, resourcing issues coming through. Main Road 358 with the rectification works. GHD is continuing with the design, so hopefully we'll have some finalised designs during this month of July. And council has awarded the EOI for preferred contractors to tender the work.
This is works behind you, this resourcing issues. GHD and all those guys have been there for a long time. What's happened?
No, Main Road 62 was resourcing issues, not for 358. 358 is just waiting for the design works to come back. Yeah. So those guys, we were expecting those full designs to come back by the end of July. Local and regional roads, heavy patching works is lower by about 229 Ks. Again, we're just behind a little bit with our heavy patching works that we commenced in June, and it will continue into the early part of this year. Level crossing works that we've completed on 5 of our level crossings. The works are completed and they're lower than budget, which was quite good by 100,000. Curb and guttering up in Marundi. So just some initial delays that we had with the heritage works. We got into the job pretty well, but just with a bit of weather issues and so forth, we couldn't finalise it by the end of June. So it'll be finalised in this current month we're in now. The intersection up here in Stafford and Liverpool streets, it's lower by about 100,000 again. Works are continuing, but they're a little bit behind schedule. So they're again, completion early this year. Scone CBD, the project's slightly behind schedule at the moment, just with the awarding of the tender of 133 Kelly Street. And the approval processes for CBD. So it's a little bit behind at this point. And the Air Park sewer pump station upgrade, we've just deferred that project until and be finalised in conjunction with the airport redevelopment works that are out there.
Can we just duck back to 133 Kelly Street?
Yep.
Where are we up to with that?
As far as I'm aware, that the actual preferred tenderer to do those works is actually working on one of council's other projects at the moment, and then he will revert straight to that as soon as that project's finished up in Marundi.
It's a project like watching paint dry, isn't it?
Yes. So obviously that's a priority that's on the list for him to move straight into. Marundi new reservoir, the project's lower than budget by about 300,000. We're just waiting on some final invoices to come through because that project is completed. And the Scone Aberdeen low lift pump station works is a bit lower by about 70,000. So that's continuing and it should be completed by the end of the year. So as you can see, $4.1 million variance to budget. Moving into the budget summary overall, there's no net variations coming through with the budget. The minimal votes come through in June, obviously just to move a few things with RAs mainly coming into the mix to get ready for the budget in the current year we're in. Bank funds and investment reports. At the end of June, we had about $34 million in funds held. 33 of that was sitting in our investments. Capital expenditure report at the end of June. So the interim result is that we've got a revised capital expenditure budget of just under $37 million, of which we spent to date just under $34 million. So it represented about 91.86. So if I make the adjustment slightly for the airport one that was out by about $1 million, it's about 89% overall. So we're nearing the 90% overall with our revised capital works program. So it's not too bad in the end. So obviously that will change coming through because we'll have a lot of costs added back into the capital works projects by year end with cut-offs. KPI side of things, attached, we've got a report in here that for the red and amber KPIs report that was tabled at the SMG meeting in July. So the summary of those is that effectively out of 158 KPI measures, we've got about 118 on track and 40 that are off track or monitoring. But a lot of these ones are the interim results coming through, and some of them will change over time. So a prime example that with the financial reporting side of things, until we do our annual financial statements, those indicators are green. They could turn to red, but also we could have other measures that will turn back to green. So we just need to be mindful that this is just the interim result, not the end of term report result. Moving on into our summary pages on 11 through to 14. Here we just got the overall fund summary, which is the three funds. And then we've got the function summary, which is all our service areas that are coming through. And as you will see, there's a few votes in there that will that are highlighted on the budget variance requests on 15 through to 16, pages 15 through to 16. And as you see in those budget variation requests, majority of those are just going through RAs. So they're just moving money back into RAs and so forth. Moving then just into our bank side of things on 17 through to 18. Here we've got the normal bank rec. As you can see, our little graphs pushed up forward. That's money due to the securing of our airport loan as highlighted in the meetings prior to the end of June. So we've secured that loan for finalisation of the airport development. And on the page 18 is our investments that we're holding. And as you note, our interest rates for all our investments are now below 1%. So it's not too flash from the investment side of things. Our loan facilities sitting on page 19 here is more or less just the indication of what the principal's owing at the end of June. So effectively we had about $37.6 million in loan funding at the moment. Moving then through just our net current asset forecast, just for your information, just to see where we think we're going to end up in regards to our net current asset position. And then we move through to the RAs, which is our descriptions on our RAs coming through from 24 through to 30, and then the actual restricted assets report, which includes the requested variations during the whole quarter, being this being a quarter report, and that effectively gives us 31 through to 37. We've more or less put back into restricted assets about $6 million overall for the quarter. So that's adding back a lot of our projects that we've had on the go. The last final report there in this one is our red and amber KPIs. So just for your information, these are just a summary of the red KPIs and the amber KPIs that come through in the major service area report that we've got happening very shortly.
Any questions, councillors? No questions? Okay, we go back to page 1. There's 5 points of the recommendation. You want to move them as a whole? Move Councillor Watts. Second, Councillor Fisher. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, over to page 43. Operational report. Have a drink, Mr. Phelps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so anybody who has any questions, just stop me, otherwise I'll just plough through. Overall, here we just look at the actual more detailed service reports coming into the mix. So asset management is our first one on 45 and 46. Here we're a little bit underspent at the moment, and pretty well. We didn't do any investigation works on an industrial rail overpass, which we thought we might be doing this year. So that was underspent, and also just in salaries, we're a little bit underspent in our salaries, but apart from that, nothing else to highlight. The KPIs, we've got 4 green indicators there, so that's pretty well in line. Communications, no votes or surrenders coming through. Underspent at the moment by about 20-odd thousand, and it's mainly due to salaries. We've had that vacancies in the communications area during parts of the year. KPI side of things on 49 and 50, 2 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Corporate services, here we've got no votes or surrenders again. Again, a little bit underspent by about 20,000. And effectively, it relates to our corporate planning vacancy that we've had there since July. So we're still a little bit underspent in that area in the salaries. KPI side of things though, we've got a red indicator here just with our council policies. We only reached 65% by the end of the year. So that's a focus that we've got coming through for this current financial year. Customer service on page 53, no votes or surrenders, nearly spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. And our indicator on page 54 is a green indicator, so nothing to highlight there. Depot operations, here we've got a small vote coming through, and that's just to tidy up the actual trade waste project there. We had a bit of late cost coming in for the awning that we've put over the facility there. So apart from that, we're a little bit underspent at the moment. So overall, nothing else to highlight. Financial services, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit overspent in this area at the moment. Just with our cleaning costs were a lot higher. We had off contract rates for the last 6 months of the year. Now we've secured a new contract moving forward, so that was a little bit higher. And our bank charges were a little bit higher as well, which we have been talking to our bankers about and trying to work out a solution to the overspend there. The only other area is the payroll area, just a little bit higher in our salaries in the payroll group there, just with some back pays coming through that had to be paid. Our operations report on 59 for our on costs, so pretty well end of year. We're nearly spot on with our on costs, which is quite good. So it's been in track. And then with the KPIs on page 60 to 61, here we've got 10 indicators, which is all green at the moment. And as I said earlier, there's a number of these that cannot be determined until the actual statutory audit has been completed. So a few of these may turn red by the year end. Fleet management on page 62 to 63, no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit in front of budget, which is quite good. Pretty well our proceeds from our disposal of our plant coming through has been higher. So the actual second-hand market is quite buoyant at the moment, based on the fact that there's no stock in the countries at the moment for a lot of our items that we secure. So we've been getting good prices. Bit underspent in our fuel and plant expenses as well. So a few wins coming through. KPI side of things on page 64 through to 66, 3 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. General management on page 67, no votes or surrenders. A little bit underspent here, just with salaries while the general manager's position was vacant during the year. And KPI on page 68, a green indicator there. Governance and risk on page 69, no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit over budget at the moment in this area, mainly due to recognition of some end of year debtors for our insurance claims. So we'll be recognising those, and also our premium incentive that we get from our brokers hasn't come through as well. And I don't think that will come through based on the tough world of the insurance markets at the moment. So the other side of the revenue side is the expenditure. Here we've just got to recognise an accrual for our end of year audit from our external auditors. And also just in general expenses there, we've been a little bit overspent in that area at this point in time. We've had a lot of legal costs in regards to GIPA requests coming through. So that's been overspent, unfortunately. So our KPI on page 70 is a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight. Human resources on pages 71 to 72.
Can I just interrupt there? Just noting from the ARIC committee meeting that there are a number of actions outstanding of quite long standing as well. Should we have a KPI maybe for actions arising from that committee? Would that assist in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just confirming what the KPIs were. So the KPIs are really just how many times ARIC meets, which isn't really a performance measure of how well we're performing against those items. I share your concern. At the last ARIC meeting, there was a number of outstanding actions from 2019 and 2020. Since that meeting, I've made, I guess, some inroads to try and to address that, create at least a single register and provide an adequate report to the next ARIC meeting. In regard to your question about KPIs, I don't see an issue with it. In fact, I think it's a good measure to be able to measure our performance against the audit actions that come from ARIC. So we'll look at that. We're just putting the 21-22 KPIs into the system, so I don't see that as being an issue. I'm just looking to Mr. Phelps to see if that's okay.
Yeah,
but
that'll be fine.
yeah, so I think we can probably include that. Thanks, Councillor.
Okay, move back to human resources 71, 72. As I said, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit overspent at the moment, obviously with a lot of the COVID restrictions and requirements. There's a little bit of extra costs involved. On page 73, the KPI, it's a red indicator coming through here. Obviously, with the KPIs, there's a few red indicators that were really based on delivery of the CSP, which was deferred obviously with COVID. So this is one indicator. Our actual workforce management plan won't be done until this current year. So it's just been delayed due to those delays with the overall CSP. The information services are on page 74. Here we've got no votes or surrenders. A little bit, fair bit underspent at the moment in information services, mainly with regards to a lot of our software maintenance support. There's some additional costs expected to come in by the year end though. And also just with the upgrade of our network equipment and stuff, again, we've got a few costs that are coming through, but that upgrade always continues throughout the year into next year. The KPI on page 75, a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Infrastructure support on 76, no votes or surrenders coming through. And nearly spot on target coming through. A little bit overspent in our salaries, but that's about it. KPIs on 77, a red indicator and a green indicator. Red indicator is mainly in regards to our cemetery register review. So we're just looking at that. It's one of those indicators that we've just got to gauge some information on it. And that one hopefully will turn green by the course of when we do the end of year reports. Revenue services here, no votes or surrenders again, and we're nearly spot on budget overall. So nothing to highlight there. Obviously ups and downs in user fees and our legal costs with the debt collection with COVID being reduced there. Moving into KPIs on pages 80 through to 81. Here we've got a green indicator and also a red indicator. And the red indicator is just with our receivables. Obviously with COVID, we haven't been able to debt collect in great depth. So for the whole year, we sort of like had to sit back and wait. We've been making continual inquiries with customers to make sure that we recover as much as we can, but we'll go into the debt collection processes now because they're back open again. Moving into stores on pages 82. So here we're a little bit over at the moment in expenditure, and it's just mainly in regards to our gravel stockpile. So those costs will be reallocated with the end of year processing. KPI side of things on 83 to 84. I got an amber indicator and 3 green ones. Just with the amber one, we're a little bit over in our stock levels. So we're looking at trying to reduce those levels and bring them back in within the 820,000. Sustainability on page 85, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit overspent at the moment, just in regards to salaries. But apart from that, nothing else to highlight there. And the KPIs on page 86, 2 green indicators coming through. Okay, moving into community services and education on 87. No votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit underspent overall during the year. And it's mainly due to salaries, just with increased staff leave and a few COVID restrictions. So apart from that, nothing else to highlight. Moving into our KPIs on pages 88 to 89, 2 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Government Place Hostel, here on 90 to 91. Overall, no votes or surrenders at the moment. Still always a struggle over there. Obviously, with our revenue streams down a fair bit, it's had an effect on our bottom line overall. And also with the loan facility not drawing that down. But we've got an offsetter there with our capital works program. So obviously we're moving forward with that. The facility is now fully tenanted with residents. So our revenue numbers will continue going quite well for this current year we're in now. KPI side of things, moving in through from 92 to 94, 3 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Our independent living units on 95 through to 96, no votes or surrenders coming through here. As you can see, bottom line is we're fair but over budget. When you take into account our recognition of our insurance of 240K and then just a little bit underspend in our capital expenditure, those are the two main drivers behind that imbalance with the budget. KPI side of things on 97, a green indicator there, so nothing else to highlight there. Before and after school care, no votes or surrenders here on 98 through to 99, and we're nearly spot on budget overall to the end of the year, so nothing to highlight there. KPI side of things on 100 through to 103, 4 green indicators there, so hit all the marks in regards to that service. Early Learning Centre, here we've got a few surrenders coming through and also a little vote. So we secured a late grant amount of money just from a land care project. Plus also we just moved out a bit of costing for our Start Strong program. So those are the two votes coming through and surrenders. Overall, we're a little bit behind budget by about 25,000. Just with our revenue streams, we're a little bit lower in utilisations over there, obviously with COVID and a position that's vacant over there at the moment, the ECT, so the early childcare teacher. So hopefully we'll secure that position very shortly. Moving into our KPI side of things, obviously with the utilisation, as said, with the revenue being a little bit lower, it's an amber indicator and we've got 1 green indicator there. So apart from that, nothing else to highlight. Family daycare on page 108, no votes or surrenders coming through. Here we're a little bit in front of budget just with our carer payments for the CCS entitlements. So we're a little bit under budget there, but apart from that, nothing else to highlight. And our KPIs, here we've got 1 green indicator and a red indicator. Obviously with the carer payments being down, obviously we've got the utilisation for our educators as well. It's a little bit down, so it's a red indicator, and it's mainly driven by a COVID related item, just with the number of children being looked after in that service. Moving into social protection on 111 through to 112. Here we've got a few surrenders going back into the mix. Obviously with COVID effects, we've had a lot of programs that have been delayed overall. So pretty well our crime prevention program is a little bit behind. Their disability in action and audit program is a little bit behind. Domestic violence program is a little bit behind, and the International Women's Day had been postponed as well. So obviously we've moved those back out and put them back into the RA so that we can bring them forward into next year. So apart from that, nothing else to highlight there. KPI side of things on 113 through to 115, 3 green indicators coming through there, so nothing to highlight there. Youth services on 116 to 117. Here we've just got, again, a small surrender just for our CASP grant. So we just moved that back into an RA for next year. Overall, we're pretty well hitting the mark and coming through. A little bit underspent at the moment just in our drop-in centres. And as you'll see, obviously with COVID, our numbers are down in regards to the attendance to our youth centres, which is on page 119. So that's our red indicator. We've got 3 green and 1 red. So obviously with lower numbers coming through, our costs for the drop-in centres is also down. Moving into camping areas and caravan parks on 122 to 123. Here we've got no votes or surrenders, a little bit overspent at the moment, just with our caravan park expenses. So just over budgeting our salaries. So we're just looking at the staffing of those operations coming through for the current year we're coming through with. Obviously with COVID, we had additional costs over there by having to man the facility coming in. Moving into the KPIs, here we're on 124 to 125, 2 green indicators coming through there. So very good and nothing else to highlight there. Community Connect services on page 126, no votes or surrenders coming through. And here again, we're nearly spot on budget. So there's no problem there. Economic promotion here on pages 127 to 128. Here we're a little bit overspent at the moment. And it again comes back to recognition of the grant funding coming through. So once that grant funding's recognised, we'll come back in within budget. So nothing else to highlight in there. KPIs on 129 through to 130, 2 green indicators there. So nothing to highlight there. Private works on page 131, no votes or surrenders coming through. As you can see, we're a little bit behind budget coming into here. With the demand for our private works is well down, as you can see. So again, comes back to resourcing coming through. Our direct overall percentage coming into the mix is actually meeting target. So we're actually getting our overall gross profit, but with limited sales, it makes it very difficult in that area. KPI side of things, as I said earlier, we're hitting the mark with our percentage, but it's just with the turnover is the thing that's knocked down a little bit. Moving into our real estate area from 133 to 135. Here we've just got that surrender from the Campbell's Corner works that we mentioned earlier, just with no major works due to having the actual the roof replaced. So that was the primary focus this year. So we've just moved that into next year to continue that works on those structural engineer assessments. Overall, we're a little bit behind budget coming through. And again, as I said earlier in the mix, mainly comes back to our revenue stream. So obviously we'll be recognising an NDVIA grant for our roof replacement. Our land development's $100,000 behind. That's pretty well the land development sale out at the airport. And our commercial rent obviously is affected by the COVID concessions and a few shop vacancies at this point in time. The offsetter against that revenue streams is our Campbell's Corner roof. It's a little bit behind schedule. We thought that might have been finished by the end of June, but it'll just roll into the current month and probably be finalised in August, I'm hoping. And obviously we've done that for a little bit less than the 450. So we're looking at our fire suppression as well in regards to that facility. So that'll take a little bit extra time. KPI side of things coming through on pages 136 to 138, 2 green indicators there. We've got an amber and a couple of reds. A couple of red ones pretty well comes back to the Crown Lands management plans that we're doing, and also native title projects. Those, the statutory requirements for those to complete have now been extended. So there's no set date at the moment for those 2 items of work. Obviously, we're still waiting on the department to come back to us with our categorisation. So we're sitting in limbo at the moment in that area. The other one there, the amber one, just with our lease revenue, as I said earlier, with a few shop vacancies, that's a little bit below target at this point, but very, very close, hitting the mark. Moving into sale yards on 139 to 140, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Pretty well overall, and all our revised numbers coming into the mix are a little bit in front of budget, which is quite good. A little bit more buoyant on our revised sales up there, the actual user fees. So it's a little bit up, and that's been offset by a few extra operational and truck wash costs coming through. But apart from that, nothing else to highlight. With our KPIs here, we've got 2 green indicators and a red indicator, and the red indicator is the one where we're a little bit behind on our target of 35. We reached 29,000 during the year. Interesting is that the numbers were increased by 15% for the June month, because we've had 7 sales in that June month, which included a couple of extra sales coming through, which was quite good for the facility up there. Moving into golf course on 144. Here we're a little bit in front of budget, which is quite good. Still a bit up in our revenue streams for our course green fees at the moment. We haven't received any sponsorship as yet during the year. So hopefully we'll secure some sponsorship into the current financial year we're moving into now. But the green fees and the usage of the facility down there has been quite buoyant. Tourism and area promotion, here on pages 145 to 146. Here we've just got a couple of surrenders coming through, just with a couple of the events, the major events that are happening and being postponed into the later in this current financial year into October and obviously September. So we've just moved those back into an RA to bring them back in for next year. So overall, we're a little bit in front of budget coming through, and that's mainly due to lower costs in regards to Festival of the Fleeces coming into the mix. So obviously with that event being reduced in its structure, so we've had a few less costs coming into the mix. Moving into our KPIs on 147 to 148, one red indicator there and a green indicator. Obviously the red indicator is referrals to the VIC, so a little bit behind there, but that's obviously COVID related. Noxious weeds on 149, pretty well spot on budget coming through. We got a little bit of extra money from the final portion of our grant read project, so $1,000 extra there. Waste management on pages 150 through to 152. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit behind budget, all our revised budgets coming into the mix. Again, as I said earlier, a little bit higher in our state government levy costs and our waste collection costs, which has been a little bit offset by the operation costs of both Murrundi and Merriwa being down a little bit, but overall it's a little bit overspent there. But with a lot of that state levy, we've got a stockpile of clean fill, which will come out the other way and give us deductions for our levy into the current financial year. So we will get the benefit coming back.
And just excuse me,
Yep.
let's go back to page 146.
Yep.
Town Christmas lights, was that $4,000? Was that across the Shire or just what was needed? What's the story on that?
The $4,000 relates across the Shire if any replacements are required. For the year just gone, the Christmas lights in 2020, there was no request for additional lights,
Right.
but there is another 4,000 in next year for this year's Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah. In
Thank
case
you.
we do
Yeah, I
need
just
more
think
lights.
some of them were not functioning at Merriwa, so we need to address that.
Yeah, so as soon as we're let known that we need additional lights, we'll go out and
Okay,
purchase
thank you.
them. KPI side of things for waste management, moving through from pages 153 through to 156, 4 green indicators there, so nothing else to highlight there. Stormwater management on 157 to 158. Here, no votes or surrenders coming through, underspent at the moment, mainly due to our maintenance activities we've undertaken for our stormwater drainage during the year. So it's been lower than budget. KPI side of things, we've got 3 green indicators and 1 red indicator. The red indicator on 163 is complaints in regards to drainage overflows. So we've had a couple of above average rainfall events happening during the year, which we've got some complaints about. But with the underspend in our maintenance, we need to make sure that we spend that maintenance and actually clean a few of these drains out that might reduce those complaints coming through. So we'll be mindful of that in the current financial year we're in now. Moving into our street cleaning on 164, no votes or surrenders here, just slightly over in our contract street cleaning, street sweeping activities coming through. Overall, we've actually hit the target in regards to the amount of kilometres that have swept though. So green indicator there.
Was this and a fresh contract has been drawn up with them, or is it a continuing contract?
Continuing contract. So
When is
it's a
it?
continuing contract at this point in time.
Right.
And we've just probably had a little bit additional waste collection costs. So pick up from the roads, they picked up a lot more material, and our landfill costs were a little bit higher than what we thought. But it's very much lower than what we were paying for like 3 years ago in regards to street cleaning.
Thank you.
Council services on page 166, no votes or surrenders coming through here, a little bit underspent overall in the council services area. Just a bit lower in our mayor and elected members expenses there with our training, seminars and conferences during the year, obviously with COVID affected coming through. And we're a little bit underspent in our 356 contributions during the year. So that's just falling out at the end of the year. KPI side of things, here we've got 2 green indicators, and the red indicator is the CSP. So the CSP obviously won't be done until this current financial year we're moved into. Rates, grants and interest on 168. Here we just got a very small vote coming through, just fixing up the allocation going into next year for our financial assistance grants received in advance. Overall, we're a little bit behind budget here. As I said earlier, lower financial assistance grants, plus also the interest components that we've been achieving has been a lot lower. Health services on page 169. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit in front of budget overall. As you can see, the actual statutory fees are down a fair bit coming through, but also our costs are very much down as well. So overall, we've had a lot of vacancies in that area that has affected some of our inspection regimes. So overall, apart from that, nothing else to highlight. And as you can see on pages 170 to 171, there's 2 red indicators there coming through. So obviously you can see that they are affected by the vacancies that we have in that area, which we're looking at filling very shortly, if not already filled. Pages 172 to 173 are just a duplicate of the previous. Has been very good. Looking at low income housing on 175, here we're nearly spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. Sorry, I missed one there. The emergency housing on 174, there we've had no costs at all coming through for the facility over here at 145 Liverpool Street. Obviously, once that's done up, those costs will come through for this current financial year. KPIs on pages 176 to 177 for the low income housing. 1 green indicator there and a couple of red indicators there. They are both green. So they've been updated since these reports come in. So those 2 indicators are green. So there's 3 green indicators coming into the mix. Moving into public conveniences on 179, here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit overspent, as you can see down the bottom line there. And again, it comes back to the grant, the actual grant recognition at year end. So obviously in the revenue streams there, it's behind by the same amount that we're out overall. KPI side of things on 180, a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Public cemeteries on 181 to 182, no votes or surrenders coming through the mix here. Overall, we're pretty well on track with our budget there. A little bit under in our revenue streams for our site plots, columbarium and interment fees. It's a little bit down, but also our maintenance has been a little bit lower as well. So it's a bit of an offsetter coming through. KPI side of things on pages 183 to 184. Both green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Street lighting on page 185, no votes or surrenders here. Here we're a little bit underspent in our budget, which is quite good. We've got a little bit extra in our revenue for our annual lighting subsidy. Plus also our costs have been down for street lighting, which is a bonus too. So that's been a good win. KPI side of things on 186, a green indicator there, just with the complaints about the lighting. So that's a big improvement. I think last year we were red in that area. Town planning on 187 to 188, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Here we're a little bit in front of budget, which is quite good, a little bit underspent. Overall, as you can see, with our town planning, our contributions are a little bit behind at this point in time, but we revised those massively during the year. So that'll just go back to the RA. And our grants for our flood management at Scone review, it's a little bit behind schedule at the moment, so it's a little bit under there. But the other side of the coin is that our costs, obviously, with our flood management plan has been lower on pages 188. So that's a positive to budget. Plus also our planning portal integration. So that's continuing on at the moment. That's just with the digital, using online technology. So that software and purchasing of goods for that is continuing into the current year. KPI side of things on pages 189 to 191, all green indicators there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Building control coming through on page 192. Here again, we're a little bit underspent overall, and again, it comes back to the vacancies we've been holding in that area. So obviously we're underspent by quite substantially in that area. KPI side of things, we've got one green indicator and one red indicator. That red indicator has now been amended and actually should be green. So it's turned to green. So they're both green indicators now. Moving into quarry operations on 195, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Overall, we're a little bit in front of budget, but it's mainly due to the gravel or the work that we're doing on the compliance out at the Kewen. It's a little bit lower than budget by about 79,000. And that's been offset by our quarry revenue, which has been a little bit lower as well. Obviously with the Kewen, with the compliance issue, we haven't been able to drag out as much material as what we anticipated. But that now is being resolved. So we should be moving forward with the pit out there. Moving into the KPIs on 196, green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Animal control on 197, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Our animal control revenue is a little bit down at the moment, obviously with our impounding and infringement and fines. It's very hard to judge those costs or infringements coming through. And our animal control costs have been a little bit higher as well, just with our salaries. So the guys are out doing the work, but we haven't had as many infringements, notices and registrations coming through. The actual KPIs on 198 through to 199, here we've got one green indicator and one red indicator. The red indicator has been amended and it actually is green now. So it's just got into the mix as a red indicator there. Emergency services on page 200 to 201, no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit underspent at the moment, which is mainly the Murrundi SES shed. So it's a little bit behind schedule at the moment, so it should be finished in this current financial year. Moving into fire, rural fire service and the New South Wales Fire Brigade protection, no votes or surrenders coming through. Again, a little bit underspent at the moment, just with some of our costs coming through in there for our vehicle maintenance and also our capital expenditure on our sheds and so forth. So it's a little bit behind schedule at this point in time, but apart from that, nothing else to highlight. LG regulation enforcements on 204, no votes or surrenders coming through and nearly spot on budget. So nothing to highlight there. And our KPI is a green indicator. So we've got two green indicators there on pages 205 to 206. Community centres and halls on 207 to 208. Here we've just got a little surrender coming through, just moving out the rural public halls grant program that we have. Obviously with COVID, we haven't received many grants coming into the mix. So we've decided to move that into an RA for the benefit of a lot of our community halls that we have, so that that is offered up for next year. So we're looking at just moving that into the mix. Overall, our end result is a little bit overspent at this point in time, and that more or less comes back to our grant for some of our infrastructure works that we're doing. So obviously when we recognise the end of year grants there, that'll bring that back into alignment. Moving into our KPIs on 209, here we've got just an amber indicator, and just with the number of bookings, obviously with COVID, there's been a lot of restrictions, but we almost hit the target overall. So that is quite a good result given COVID restrictions that we've had. Moving into cultural services on pages 210 to 211, here again, we've got a little surrender again. Another program for the public arts program. So we've just moved the money that we haven't had to spend in the current year and just moved it into an RA to bring that back in for next year. So obviously to allow those programs to continue moving in. Overall, we're a little bit in front of budget overall coming through. Just with COVID, the effects of that has meant that a lot of programs have been delayed or cancelled during the year. Moving into our KPIs on 212, green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Museums on 213. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit in front of budget just with our building maintenance, just lower requirements for the maintenance of those museums. Other sport and rec, no votes or surrenders coming through, pretty well on budget, a little bit underspent at this point in time, just with, again, some of those programs a bit lower in cost, mainly due to COVID-related issues. KPI side of things in regards to other sport and rec, 3 green indicators there. So obviously we're still getting out and doing the events and so forth that we need to. Parks and Gardens on pages 218 to 219. Here we've just got, we're moving some costs for our playground equipment upgrade. We didn't undertake during the year. We've moved that up into an RA to bring that in next year so we don't lose the benefit for upgrading some of our playground equipment. So we've brought that back in through an RA. Overall, we're a little bit underspent in this area at the moment. And the main reasons effectively are the capital works expenditure. It's down a fair bit at this point in time. So obviously with the Mary Ward Driver Reviver facility, we're still waiting on some costs to come in for that, so that it will improve. And that's been offset slightly. On the other one is the Aberdeen Riverwalk, beg your pardon. So it's a little bit behind budget at the moment, so we'll just need to look at finalising that project as well. And obviously in this area with Parks and Gardens, we've got the grants to be recognised at year end as well. So there's a few moving parts still to happen in Parks and Gardens.
Just one question on page 219.
Yep.
Cashless Playground Shades Cloth and Cashless Hall and Playground. My understanding is that that's moving on. However, is it going to have the shade cloth or is that pending over there for their playground equipment?
I'm not 100% sure whether the shade cloth is included in that, Ron.
No.
I'll have to confirm. It may not be.
I wondered that. I thought it was the playground equipment and the fence around it, because I think I'd ask that question.
I'd have to check on the shade cloth.
Would you mind finding out, please?
Sure.
Okay, we'll just take that one on notice. With the actual the shade that we backed out there, that effectively we were going for grant funding through the Cancer Council, and we were unsuccessful getting that grant.
Okay.
So that's why that one was
So
backed
at this
out.
stage, it's not allocated.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Moving into our KPI side of things, here we've got on 220 to 221, 2 red indicators coming through, just with some of the programs being a little bit behind, and also with the unsatisfactory cleanliness and maintenance conditions of the parks and open spaces. So obviously we'll be addressing those to try and fix those up coming into the current financial year. Public libraries on page 222 to 223, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Fair bit underspent at the moment, and there's a few factors with that. As I highlighted earlier in the summary pages, our admin costs are behind, underspent at the moment, mainly due to the vacancy from the trainee. General expenses, which is a little bit about 75,000 underspent, and that's book purchases that we're just waiting on the invoices to be processed, so that will fix that up. Our regional library contributions down because we've pulled away from the separation from Muswellbrook in regards to the regional library. So overall, we'll have a lower cost coming through. And our Scone library development, we thought we had a bit more design and development costs coming through for the facility over there. So it's a little bit underspent at this point in time. So obviously it'll move into next financial year. So overall, apart from that, there's nothing else to highlight in there. Yep.
Through the chair, our primary
focus at this point in time is looking at a technical librarian for the library. So we're looking at filling that position first before looking at a trainee.
Moving at our KPIs on pages 224 through to 229, we've got 4 green indicators and 2 red indicators. The red indicators are a fair bit of COVID related. So it more or less lower loans, library loans annually, and also our visits to the facilities, obviously with a few reduced hours and so forth due to COVID. So apart from that, nothing else to highlight there. Sporting grounds and venues. Here we've just got a couple of surrenders for a couple of our capital works programs on 232, just moving the finalisation of the Wilson Memorial Oval, just moving that up into an RA and bringing that or into the grant funding area. And also our White Park electrical supply is a little bit behind schedule, so it's just the project's been delayed, but it'll continue into next financial year. Overall, if you look on page 232, massively overspending our budget area there. Again, it really does come back to our recognition of our grant funding. So as you can see, we're about $400,000 difference in our overall revenue streams. So that will have a big effect on the bottom line once those go through. But also to note is we're overspending our servicing of our sporting ground facilities and also the White Park operation. So obviously, as mentioned in the summary, we're looking at that to optimise the business efficiencies and strategies moving into next financial year. So it's under review, the White Park facility. Apart from that, nothing else to highlight coming through there. KPI side of things on 233 to 234, 2 green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Swimming pools. Here we've got a small surrender going back, or a fairly large surrender, and that's mainly just to move back into the section 94 where we were paying the improvements to the Scone pool out of. So obviously the Scone pool, if we need to do more improvements in that area, we'll bring that back in for next year. So that's the main reason for the underspend at this point in time. So apart from that, nothing else to highlight in that area. KPI side of things on 237, a green indicator there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Moving into aerodrome on 239, no votes or surrenders coming through here. As you can see, obviously on the bottom line on 239 there, $4.5 million differential. So obviously it comes back to our revenue streams. So on page 238, so it's behind by the 4.5 million as highlighted in the summary pages earlier. And with the costs associated with the aerodrome, again, as highlighted in the summary pages, just with our admin and maintenance and operational is a little bit higher. Overall, our airport development, it's underspent there of about 120,000. And as I mentioned earlier, another $1 million will go there that we underspent during the year. KPI side of things on 240 through to 244, 5 green indicators there coming through. So nothing else to highlight there. So obviously we're hitting the marks with the KPI side of things. Moving into bridges on pages 245 to 246, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit in front of budget at the moment, mainly due to the capital works expenditure. So it's well and truly down at the moment, mainly 2 areas there being Camerons and Morella Street. They've offset obviously with the grant funding on page 245. So as you can see, those 2 items are grant related. So grant funding's down obviously by those same amount of money. The main reason why we're in front of budget is obviously our maintenance, as we mentioned earlier, just with the operational costs from the bridges. So apart from that, nothing else to highlight. Moving into our KPIs on 247 to 249. Yep.
In relation to the Allen Bridge, since that's just happened, I noticed won't affect this budget, and it's probably insurance, but we'll have to take from here first to repair, or we wait for insurance.
Effectively for Allen Bridge, we'll be looking at whether or not we recover that from the person who damaged Allen Bridge.
Okay,
So there's investigations being done at the moment in regards to that, and we've got a separate job being set up to capture all costs in regards to Allen Bridge. And obviously we'll be going through different channels to recover that money. Okay. Moving our KPIs on 247 to 249.
Sorry, do we know when it might be, get a first assessment on the damage to the bridge?
I think there was an inspection yesterday, actually. I don't know if it's
Any
on there.
word back?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The consulting engineer was coming yesterday. I'm yet to receive the report, but I'm catching up with Jeff later in the morning to find out what the initial assessment was. One of the difficulties is we obviously know the members that have been broken. They're very obvious. It's the members that haven't been broken but have been stressed,
Exactly.
which will take some time to assess. The
Well,
second
first-
part.
The first two from the direction he came in are visibly cracked.
Yes, that's right. So there may be some stress cracks, but they may not be immediately observable without sort of doing some very thorough investigation. So my suspicion is the engineer's assessment yesterday won't have captured everything. It'll just be a first assessment and he'll need to continue to do that. The second part of that equation then is we need to then arrange contractors to then replace those members, and some of them, quite large timber girders, and sourcing that material and the contractors to do the work will take some time. So it's early days and we'll continue to keep you updated, but that's the best information we've got at this stage.
Thanks.
Okay, moving back into the KPIs for bridges on 247 to 249, one red indicator and two green. The red indicator obviously is the capital works program. Apart from that, nothing else to highlight. Footpaths on page 250, 251. Here we've got just a small vote going through just to put some money back into the Moobie Cycleway, which effectively we engaged the contract and had them on site to finalise that works, which was quite good. Overall, we're a little bit underspent at the moment, mainly due to the footpath over at Merriwall, which is continuing. So it'll be finalised this current financial year. Moving at our KPIs on 252 to 253, a green indicator and a red indicator. So we've received a few more complaints for unsafe conditions of our footpaths. So obviously we'll need to address those coming into this current year. RMS state roads, here we've got no votes or surrenders. As you can see, we're overspent by 260,000, which should correct itself when we bring through the end of year adjustment for the June claim coming into the mix. So that should bring that back into alignment. With our KPI side of things on 255, 256, two green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. Regional roads, here we've got a few surrenders going back into the grant funding area, and just some movement of the works for the guardrail replacement. So we've just got with Main Road 62, we've just moved some money back into the grant funding area for R2R purposes, and obviously the guardrail from Main Road 358 through to Main Road 105. So we're just moving some costs around there. Overall, we're a little bit overspent at this point in time. Again, it comes back to the recognition of our grant funding for a lot of our programs, but we were overspending our regional maintenance during the year. So obviously we had a lot more maintenance costs involved. Moving into our KPI side of things on page 259 to 261, here we've got one green indicator and three red indicators. So obviously we need to fully address the red indicators coming through in the mix. So moving into our local roads, moving on 263 to 265. Here again, we just got a very small financial assistance grant allocation adjustment. Apart from that, we're nearly spot on budget overall, but there is a lot of moving parts in this budget. Obviously, we'll be recognising a lot of end of year debtors for grant funding coming through, and that effectively has an effect on our capital works programs on pages 264 to 265, where we're underspent at this point in time of 280,000. So once we have those items coming through, then hopefully that budget will be back in alignment. Overall, with our operational costs, all our maintenance areas there, we've got a few ups and downs throughout the maintenance area there, but we're in the end, by the end of the year, we're underspent by about 120,000 overall. So we'll address that obviously with the new budget going forward and the extra funds coming through, that those programs will be pushed along. Moving into our KPI side of things on 266 through to 270. Here we've got 1 green indicator and 4 red indicators. So obviously we need to address a lot of our road infrastructure needs. So again, we'll just have to address those coming into the current financial year into the mix. Moving into transport auxiliaries on page 271 to 272. Here we've just recognised the 300,000 in additional grant funding that we received from our public spaces legacy grant that we secured, and obviously we secured the second half of that. So that's a $2 million grant funding opportunity that we secured through our DA planning area by meeting some targets in that area. So obviously there's benefits behind that. Overall, with our KPI, with our overall position in regards to that on 272, as you can see, we're in front of budget by about $400,000. 300 of that effectively relates to that additional grant funding, but also just with, as said earlier, just with our capital expenditure in regards to 133 and the revitalisations area, a little bit behind at this point in time. KPI side of things, 273 to 274, we've got a red indicator and a green indicator. The red indicator is the capital works program, just a little bit behind. So that's the red indicator there. Moving into our water supply area. So as we work through these on 275 through to 276 with Merry Wars water supply, pretty well spot on budget overall. So nothing really to highlight there. Our Marundi water supply on 277 to 279. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. As you can see, we're a little bit overspent at this point in time. And that's mainly, again, recognition of grant funding for the pipeline. So obviously with the pipeline, that project's finished, but with Restart, we've got a fair bit of funding that's still available where they hold 10% back until the project's fully complete. So that may stay in abeyance for another 12 months yet until the village retic is completed, coming through. So again, we'll recognise that as an end of year debtor coming through the mix. The offsetter against that 500,000 is the Marundi reservoir, a little bit underspent at this point in time. Moving into Scone and Aberdeen water. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit in front of budget, and it's mainly a couple of capital works programs there that has got it in front of budget, which is the low lift pump on page 282, and just our Scone water treatment plant, just the initial works for that is a little bit underspent by the end of the year. KPI side of things, we've got 1 green, 1 amber, 1 red, a true traffic light there. So we've got a red indicator mainly in regards to poor quality of dirty water in Scone. So obviously we address that straight away. Apart from that, nothing else to highlight. Merry War Sewerage on page 286 to 287, no votes or surrenders coming through. Pretty well nearly spot on budget coming into the mix. Little bit under in our Cassler sewer grant at the moment. Obviously we'll recognise something at the end of the year. And the offsetter against that has been, we haven't done any CCTV works. So we haven't done any works there. And also our Merry War sewer pump station is a little bit behind budget, but I beg your pardon, the project's complete for a little bit less than what we anticipated the cost would be.
That, Mr. Chair, the sewerage for Casslers, we just seem to be not making any progress there at all. I think Cardno had to come back with a revised quote. Yep. But how are we going to fund all this? I mean, if it comes back similar to what it was before, is there anything in reserves, or is it we just sit and wait? Because otherwise, I mean, the people of Casslers are not very happy of it going on. How can we address it? That's what I'm asking.
We'll have to wait until we actually get those costings back and then determine from that that'll go back through council. So that'll be a determining factor into the future as soon as we get those costings back. We know where actually sit from a cost point of view, and then we can look at different strategies beyond that to see where we go. So
Just through you, Mr Mayor, I think I've answered a similar question before, Councillor Campbell, but it is unaffordable to the residents in its present form, and it will not proceed without grant funding. That's the short answer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. General Manager. I understand that, but I just believe that we need to have a strategy when we go back to the people and just say, it's just, we spent so much money with Cardinal. I mean, they haven't given us anything, really.
okay, moving into Murrundi Sewerage on pages 288 to 289. No votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit overspent at the point in time, just with extra costs in regards to the sewer treatment plant predominantly. So apart from that, nothing else to highlight. Scone and Aberdeen Sewerage on pages 290 to 292. No votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit underspent overall coming through, and the main reason for that is the CCTV works is underspent at this point in time, and the Air Park pump station, which is just deferred until further progression of the redevelopment out there at the airport, so on 291. So apart from those two, nothing else to highlight coming into the mix. KPI side of things, we've got one green indicator, a couple of amber indicators and a red indicator. And the red indicator is mainly a percentage of treated effluent recycled water. So it's showing a red indicator at this point in time. Okay, moving then into just our overall summary of our capital works expenditure, just to give you a highlighted look at what those the capital works budgets were during the year. So that's just for your pleasure to look through. But as you can see, when we get to the bottom, our revised budget is effectively half of what we went out to the community with our Depop. So that's about the only thing to highlight there.
Thank you, Mr Phelps. Any more questions, councillors? Very good report, Mr Phelps. You deserve another drink. Okay, councillors, back to page 43. 4 dot points of the recommendation. Got a mover. Move Councillor Campbell. Second, Councillor Watts. All in favour? Against? Carry. Over to page 318. Contractors and expense report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So with this report on page 321, we have an actual item that's in this report. Normally it comes through as nil all the way through. We've actually went into a contract for vendor panel, which is a procurement organisation. So effectively, we're looking at cost savings over time with quoting and so forth and putting things out to market. So it's more or less an online system, and it's used by a local government procurement as well. So it will provide benefits to council in time for securing quotes for products that we're trying to secure, and also for putting tenders and so forth out. So over the 5-year period, which the contract's for, it'll come back and gives us some benefits on the other side. So apart from that, on the other consultants and legal costs, just for your information, the dollars and cents that we've done there year to date, and a breakup of those consultants and legal costs coming through, just where we actually spent those monies, just for your perusal.
Councillors, any questions? No? Okay, back to page 318. There's 2 points of recommendation. Move Councillor Fisher. Second, Councillor Watts. All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 323. Scone Airport project update. Anyone to give, Chris, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll start off on page 323 with the KPI table there. The first one, you can see the scheduled program. It's amber. Within the last month, we've lost a week due to wet weather there. So nothing they can do about that. They were, during the last month, all of the works was pouring concrete slabs, and they were busying themselves getting them prepared. And then when it rains one day, and they really lost like the next day because they've got to bail the water out, pump the water out and get reset. So one day's rain cost about 2 days of progress, unfortunately. So they've slipped a bit behind in the last month due to all this, the drizzly weather days that we had. They're doing their best to reschedule works to do some things in parallel coming up so that they can try and recover some of those lost days. And they're working through the schedule and going to present that to us by the end of the month. The rest of them are green. There's no real things to highlight there on any of the other ones. During the last month, the activities that were completed, as I said, ongoing concrete slab works. Now, since this report's been written, they've finished all of the concrete slabs for the hangar and the terminal. So that's good. They're up out of the mud now. So the effect of wet weather will be less. They've started erecting the structural steelwork. By the end of this week, they should have the major members of the structural steelwork complete. And there was some design work done for the completion of the trunk main for the proposed regional fire suppression system for the area there. So that was completed. Over the next few months, the work to be completed will be finalising the electrical and landscaping and fire suppression designs. Now the electrical and landscaping were issued to us last week, and we'll get feedback to them next week. So they should close those out. Finalisation of the concrete works, as I said, that's been completed. They'll complete the structural steel, and then they'll be able to start the cladding. Now, as we're moving into the windy part of the year in August, we could get some weather delays due to high winds where you won't be able to lift large sheets of cladding up in the air on cranes. So, we'll have to see just how the weather holds over the next month or two. And then the precast lift shaft, that's been completed. It's standing up there now. And then installation of pipe for the regional fire suppression system. The airside civil works, there's some post-completion variation work, which is the downstream drainage and rock check dams. We've been chasing pricing on that. We've got designs done. We're chasing pricing on that from Darracon, and they've been quite slow in getting that to us, but I'm using Public Works now to put pressure on them to get us some pricing on that so that we can move forward. The critical issues for attention is finalising those outstanding designs, which I said they're in hand now. Monitoring progress of the recovery of the construction program. That's about the delays in the wet weather. And defects that have been identified in welding and painting on the steelwork, they're being rectified now. They've employed some Boilermakers to redo some of the welding. They've got to gouge and re-weld some of the poor welds that were on the structural steelwork. That was recognised by when the steelwork arrived on site. Some poor quality there, so they've had independent experts come in and do some testing on those, and they've defected some, and so there's Boilermakers out there as we speak correcting some of those welds, so grinding them out and re-welding. And then the paint work will come back over and repaint those areas that the weld repairs have taken place on. And also there was some paint peeling off. So they're inspecting all the paintwork as well and repairing that.
Mr. Chair, the repairs and that sort of thing that were done, that wasn't done by Kingston. Like the welds were done by a separate contractor, and they will be repairing those at their cost. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The welds were done in the fabrication factory in China. And it looks like there's come out of either two factories or two different welding processes. There's one type of the structural steel, the posts and other heavy members, and the welding's of quite good quality. And then there's the lattice work arched structure where there was some quite poor welding in that, and it was consistent across. So it was like they've come out of two factories. Now we raised that with them and defected it, and Kingston, of course, are controlling the build, but the suppliers of the steel are repairing it, both the welds and the paint, at their cost. So it's no cost to us.
Okay, thank you.
So moving down onto risks, the coordination of building design. There's some things that council are managing. So we've had a coordination meeting on the 10th of June with Kingston and Freeman Ryan Design. That was a really good meeting. So, and we'll have another one coming up next week, just to make sure that there's nothing falls between the cracks, because there's some things Kingston are doing, things Freeman Ryan are doing, and things we're doing. So it's coordination meetings to make sure that everything's covered, nothing falls through the cracks. Another risk is, of course, ongoing delays due to inclement weather. As I've mentioned, high wind now will cause some delays with cladding if we get it. Another risk, obtaining staff for the centre, including the gift shop, cafe and kitchen. And an unsuccessful opening event damaging the Hunter Warbirds brand. I guess that's now the opening event that was scheduled to take place this year. It's been pushed back until next year, and I think the first big event's going to be the Hunter Warbirds air show. And what month is that? March? Yeah, March.
End of March.
So that risk should be mitigated by that. Completion dates: airside was completed in April. The Hunter Warbirds anticipated completion date at the time of writing this report was the 18th of November, but since then there's been another wet weather delay day come through. And we're moving over to page 329. And if we look at the top of that, there's the expenditure. At the time of writing this report, it was just under 12.6 million actual. Since then, some invoices came in late in June. I think it's about $750,000 on top of that. Wayne's nodding. So that'll bring the year-to-date actual up to about just a little bit higher than the budget number of 13.199, the original budget, that is. Any questions?
Just a couple of quick ones. Fencing around the perimeter, what's the plan with that now? Where are we up to?
That's one of the tasks that council is managing. And Alan did a lot of work on that before he left. Didn't quite finish it, and I'll be picking that up and getting into that later this month. So, and that is preparing the documents to go to tender, because we have to get multiple pricing on that, because it's a large cost.
So as the adjoining landholders, example of Jack Smole or something, can we make sure we chat to them, read this, where the fence is going, et cetera, before we get too far into it?
Mr. Chair, yes, that's part of the plan.
Thank you.
Yes.
And the other quick one, do we need another users update meeting out there to keep everyone informed of what's happening? We haven't had one for quite a few months.
Yes, that's in the process of being organised, so absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? No other questions, councillors? Back to page.
Just through you, Mr. Chair. Just councillors, we have some designs for the Warbird logo, which we'd like to present to you quickly after this meeting, if that's okay, because we're getting to the point where we have to bed down the branding. So we've got some concept plans which we'd like to show you after this meeting, if that's okay, if everyone's free for 5 minutes after the meeting.
Yeah, sounds good. Should that also go to the committee?
It will go to the committee, but
Thank you.
to this body first.
Yep, no worries. Thank you. Okay, back to page 323. That council received the report and note the information. Got a mover? Move Councillor Fisher. Second, Councillor Campbell. All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 331. Update and property matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, this is just a general update on all things property. Some of this information is not new news, but just to briefly reflect on that. Obviously, we've got a very diverse range of property across the Shire. This particular report really focuses on the commercial, residential and vacant land aspects of that. So we have 23 properties that are currently available for lease. And obviously, you know, Campbell's Corner is an asset that houses, I guess, the most condensed number of tenants. What we've recently done, and working in close collaboration with finance, has made a decision to move away from a third-party property management tool that we were utilising, which was called Console. Quite frankly, it just was not doing the job. It has no interoperability with our internal financial systems. There was a lot of double handling with it. And unfortunately, it was putting a lot of pressure on trying to understand where tenants were at with their rental payments. So we've reverted back to Civica and Content Manager, and we're already starting to see the benefits of that. We do have a little bit of catch up to do, but what I can tell you is that around 73% of our tenants are up to date with their rent. Obviously 27% are a little bit in arrears, and we're chasing that up. But reverting back to our in-house financial products is helping us to better manage that process. So that's been a very good outcome. One of the big focuses as well with this is to ensure that every tenant has a current lease, because that has not been the case for quite some time for various reasons. So I can tell you that there is a conversation that ensued the other day with Scone Medical Practice. So obviously they're a very significant tenant. They provide us with ongoing revenue and making sure that we've got an up-to-date ironclad agreement in place. So those discussions have started in earnest. The vacancies at the moment are showing that Shop 1 and Shop 4. Now, Shop 1, of course, will be the new home for the library. We do have a tenant in there as such, which is a local martial arts academy, but effectively it is a very significant footprint, and there's a nominal fee that is paid for the 2 nights where the juniors are taken through their paces. What I can tell you is Shop 4, we've had strong interest from 2 parties to take a lease in that particular space. So I would be quite hopeful within the next few months that we'll close that gap in terms of having a tenant in Shop 4. Just turning over the page to 332, there is a little bit of commentary here on a particular incident that happened back in December of 2020, where a truck, basically because of, I guess, a combination of weather and the driveway had slippage and effectively took out a portion of the corner of the roof of the Merry War Medical Centre. So that's been a bit of an ongoing situation, and looking to obviously make good the repairs for that, and also trying to mitigate any further problems with that driveway in terms of upgrading that surface and eliminating any other potential accidents. And as stated here, that's programmed to occur the beginning of the upcoming pool season. As Wayne alluded to in his report, Crown Lands have extended the period for the plans of management. And I guess the bottom line is that had to happen because you can see from the numbers that are done here. So Gaynor Blackadder, who was seconded into a lands assistant role, has been working behind the scenes and juggling a number of priorities with this. But you can see there's been 63 native title assessments. 15 have been completed, 38 are awaiting responses in relation to Aboriginal land claims, 8 waiting on legal advice and 2 completed awaiting the appointment of a native title manager. So if you just take that into consideration with the volume of information that's been going to the Crown Lands Office, they just haven't been able to cope with it. So again, the regular updates that I get from Gaynor is we're just not getting anything back at all. So hence they have sort of rescinded that original date and basically kept it open-ended at the moment because they're just simply not coping with the volume. But we'll continue to work through that. And again, I should have prefaced this in the absence of having a full-time property coordinator at the moment. So it's a difficult task and it's being managed as best as possible in the interim. There's been no additional land sales since the last report. There is one remaining block in Perth Street, Aberdeen, which is probably the poor cousin in the relation. It's a bit of an awkward block. We've had 2 successive purchases where we've accepted their offer and they've withdrawn as a result of, I think, speaking to some of the planning people and understanding that their dream home is not going to fit the parcel of land. So it's one of these things where, you know, we'll hold firm on the asking price, but we've had 2 in a row that have quickly turned around and said, thanks, but no thanks. So that's pretty much in summary the report. I don't know whether that poses any questions at this stage.
Any questions? No? Okay. We'll put the recommendation that council just note the report. Got a mover?
Thank you.
Move Councillor Watts, second Councillor Campbell. All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 335, response to previous questions. Happy, Councillor Campbell?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just down on to my question about the youth centre. Have we taken a risk assessment on that block of land as yet? Anyone know? On the BP side?
Not as yet. I spoke to the coordinator of youth services this week and we're going to work together to see if we can get something happening there. They've got some ideas about basketball pads and a bit of fencing just to make it a bit safer. So we're looking at that at the moment.
Good job. As long as you're working with them, that's fine. Thank you. Okay. Any questions before we close the meeting? No further questions, Council. We'll declare the meeting closed at 10:14. Thank you for your attendance.